is one of the most essential elements of life. Americans enjoy some of the cleanest and most abundant water in the world. But what happens when the pipes are turned off and the tap runs dry?
How am I supposed to wash my child? How am I supposed to shower myself?
In the largest American city to ever file for bankruptcy, residents are falling behind on their water bills. Now, facing $5 billion in bad debt, the water department is taking drastic measures to plug holes, and that means cutting water.
We sent out a little over 46,000 shutoff notices in May. Of those 46,000 shutoff notices, about 4,500 were actually shut off.
Some of the city's most vulnerable are scrambling to find a way to pay their bills that have gone up 120% in the last decade, well beyond the national average. The city's water department argues that this financial burden has been put on the back burner by many families who didn't believe services would be shut off. But for Carla Walker Miller,
I'm more likely to assume that those are people who decided once their water was shut off not to buy their medicine or not to eat that evening, not to do something that's really, really important, because again, we're talking about a low-income population.
This is one of those houses that has had its water shut off. And you can tell that because the Detroit Water and Sewer Department went ahead and painted on the porch that water cut sign. Now, they've been doing this more and more frequently to abandoned houses, and they say, going after abandoned houses first in order to kind of avoid wasting water for houses that people simply don't live in. Now, up and down this block, there's one house after another with those water cut signs. These two houses happen to be right next to one another, and they're really relying on the residents to report these houses. However, more often these days, the houses facing shutoff have residents living inside.
This is the Detroit Water Brigade headquarters.
Groups like the Way Fund and the Detroit Water Brigade are working with residents to get them the water they need in the short term and the funding in the long term to sustain themselves. With poverty in the city hovering at 40% and an 8% unemployment rate, that is no easy task.
We have donations of water that people have sent. We also have water filtration devices as well as aqua tablets so that people could, get access to clean drinking water.
These groups are now calling for help from the federal government and even the United Nations to address what they describe as a humanitarian crisis. Nikita Rowley is one Detroit resident who is afraid of the consequences of missing even a single payment.
If you tell someone, I don't have water in my home, that's the first strike. You can get your children removed. Who do you go to? The water department and say, help get my children back? They don't care.
That fear isn't completely unfounded. The Michigan Welfare Rights Organization says that Child Protective Services will come into the home if water is not running. Are you afraid that if your bills keep going up, if they cannot seem to resolve this problem with the payments, that your daughter could possibly be removed?
I am.
No justice, no peace.
And she isn't alone.
No peace.
You're shutting off water on the most vulnerable first, which now raises a human rights question. It raises a moral question. What do people do once their water's cut off? How do they take their medicine if they're seniors? How do they make the formula for the babies?
However, the water department argues
We have the burden of having to be realistic, and a lot of the folks, the activists, for example, don't have that burden. They have what they feel are simple solutions, which really don't hold water. If anybody can come up with a way that we can make the Detroit drinking water as good as it is right now, for pennies on the dollar, we're willing to listen. Unfortunately, that's just not the case.
the city of Detroit recently announced an $800,000 plan to help struggling residents. But with water prices set to increase another 8.7% in July, that money is really just a drop in the bucket.
The people of Detroit are resilient. They're strong. They can take a lot. But I'm telling you, the breaking point is coming.
Leaving some residents salivating for a solution to this water crisis and others just plain thirsty. Reporting in Detroit, Michigan, Megan Lopez, RT.